Grandpa Marcus stopped mid-bite. The whole Thanksgiving table went dead silent, except for Natalie's youngest kicking the wooden leg of his chair. Marcus lowered his fork. The silver clinked sharply against his china plate. He looked straight across the turkey and the mashed potatoes, locking eyes with my father. "Why is Whitney paying $1,500 a month to live in your unheated garage?" he asked. His voice barely rose above a whisper, but it echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Dustin's jaw dropped. He stammered, his face flushing a deep, angry red, desperately trying to find the words. Brianna leaned forward and nodded too fast, her fake smile stretching thin across her face. "Natalie needs the financial help right now. Marcus, Whitney is just doing her part. It builds character." I sat frozen at the far end of the table. Flour still crusted the soles of my black bakery shoes. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the edges of my cotton napkin under the table. The illusion of our perfect family dinner shattered right there on the hardwood floor. I was 24 years old, working 50 hours a week as a bakery supervisor in Columbus, Ohio. My days started before the sun came up. I hauled 50-pound bags of flour, managed the morning rush, and stood on my feet until my lower back throbbed with a dull, relentless ache. And for all that exhausting labor, my reward was coming home to a converted garage that smelled like exhaust fumes and damp cardboard. The space heater barely worked. On winter nights, I wore my winter coat under my blankets just to stop shivering. Dustin and Brianna called it a life lesson. They told me I needed to learn the value of $1, but the truth was entirely different. They were bleeding me dry to subsidize the golden child sitting directly across from me. Natalie was 29, unemployed, and living in the pristine upstairs guest room completely rent-free. She spent her days browsing online boutiques and complaining about how hard it was to be a mother, while I paid the price for her comfort. Natalie never missed a chance to remind me of my place. Just 2 weeks earlier, she deliberately spilled a bottle of bleach on a laundry basket holding all my work uniforms. She offered a sarcastic apology, a little smirk playing on her lips, fully knowing I would have to dip into my meager grocery budget to replace them. She loved watching me struggle, but their cruelty went much deeper than simple favoritism. Dustin and Brianna were not just greedy. They were drowning in a financial nightmare of their own making. 2 years ago, Dustin took out a massive home equity line of credit to fund Natalie's delusional boutique business and her lavish, overpriced wedding. The business collapsed in 6 months. The marriage lasted barely a year. Now, my parents were 3 months behind on their second mortgage. The bank was threatening foreclosure. The $1,500 they extorted from me every single month was not building my character. It was the only thing standing between them and the street. They weaponized the concept of family duty, twisting it into a guilt trip to force me to clean up their disastrous financial messes. They told me we were keeping the family together. I was the structural beam holding up their house of cards. And they were perfectly willing to let me break under the weight. Marcus refused to back down. The silence at the Thanksgiving table grew suffocating. He slowly reached into the inside pocket of his tweed blazer and pulled out a thick stack of envelopes held together by a rubber band. He tossed them onto the table. They landed right next to the gravy boat with a heavy thud. "I found these shoved under a paperweight in your den." "Paul," Marcus said, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. Earlier that afternoon, Dustin had arrogantly ordered Marcus to fetch his reading glasses from the home office. While reaching across the desk, Marcus spotted a bright blue envelope sticking out from under a brass paperweight. He recognized the local credit union logo immediately, because he was the one who had advised Dustin to set up that specific account years ago. It was an Ohio Uniform Transfers to Minors account. When I was 16 years old, a distracted driver ran a red light and T-boned my car. The crash shattered my collarbone and left me in agonizing physical therapy for months. The insurance company settled the bodily injury claim for $45,000. Under state law, Dustin was the legal custodian of those funds, strictly bound to hand over control to me the moment I turned 21. Instead, he hid the mail. He concealed the bank statements. He kept my pain money locked away in the dark, secretly using the account as collateral to secure his own reckless loans. He deliberately kept me trapped in poverty, freezing in his garage, fully aware that a single signature could have given me enough money to buy my own home. They used my childhood trauma as their personal emergency fund. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow to the chest. My lungs tightened. The room started to spin. All those mornings waking up exhausted. All those nights eating instant noodles so I could hand over my paycheck. Every single struggle I endured was entirely manufactured. They orchestrated my suffering to protect their own comfort. Dustin slammed his heavy fist onto the table. The plates rattled. "This is my house," he screamed, the veins bulging in his thick neck. "She is too irresponsible to manage that kind of money. She would blow it all in a month." Brianna started crying on cue. Her tears were completely strategic, designed to manipulate the room and turn me into the villain. We did what we had to do to survive. Whitney, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "You have no idea what kind of pressure we are under." The old Whitney would have folded. The old Whitney would have apologized for upsetting them, shrunk down in her chair, and accepted the blame just to keep the peace. But I looked at the blue envelopes. Then I looked at Natalie, who was silently pushing her food around her plate, fully complicit. I reached into the pocket of my jeans and pulled out my phone. Dustin and Brianna had forced me to put the Columbus utility bills in my own name 3 years ago, claiming it would help me build credit. It was just another way to shift their burdens onto my shoulders. I opened my provider apps right there at the dinner table. With 3 swift taps, I terminated the home's high-speed internet connection. A second later, I scheduled the gas and electric services to shut off completely at 8 o'clock Monday morning. The router lights blinking in the hallway suddenly went dark. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the wood floor. I reached across the turkey, grabbed the stack of settlement papers, and shoved them into my coat pocket. Since I am just a selfish freeloader, I said, my voice completely steady, "You will not mind paying your own light bill. The Wi-Fi is gone. The heat stops Monday. Better find a new credit card before you freeze." I turned around and walked out the front door. Marcus followed right behind me. The cold November wind hit my face. And for the first time in my life, I breathed freely. The legal untangling took time. The bank temporarily froze the $45,000 pending a formal fraud review due to Dustin's gross custodial breach. But I was no longer trapped. Marcus fronted the first month's rent and the security deposit for a quiet, clean apartment closer to the bakery. It was a bridge loan, given with complete trust. Uncle Spencer came over with his pickup truck the next day to help me move the last of my boxes out of that miserable garage. When we finished, he stood in the doorway of my new apartment, pulled out his phone, and opened his contacts. Right in front of me. He permanently blocked Dustin and Brianna's numbers. "I am done watching them drown you to save themselves," he said, giving me a tight hug before heading back down the stairs. A week passed. I slept deeply for the first time in years. The peace was intoxicating. But toxic people never surrender quietly. They view independence as an insult. And they will always strike back when they feel their control slipping away. It happened during the busiest holiday rush at the bakery. The line of customers stretched out the door. The smell of cinnamon and fresh bread filled the air. I was boxing up a massive pastry order when the heavy glass doors swung open. 2 Columbus police officers walked straight into the shop. My stomach dropped. I looked through the front window and saw Natalie standing across the street, bundled up in a designer coat, sipping a latte. A smug, victorious grin was plastered across her face. Dustin and Brianna had maliciously filed a stolen vehicle report. The car I drove every single day, the car I made every single payment on, was originally financed under Dustin's name because I had no credit at 18. They were trying to have me arrested in front of my staff, hoping the humiliation would cost me my job and force me crawling back to their garage. The taller officer asked for my keys and told me to step away from the counter. The customers fell silent, whispering and pointing. Natalie took a step closer to the curb, eager to watch the handcuffs click shut around my wrists. I did not panic. I reached into my apron pocket, pulled out my wallet, and handed the officer a freshly printed, legally processed Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles registration. 3 days prior, Marcus had paid a visit to Dustin. He brought copies of federal mail theft statutes and explicitly explained the prison time associated with embezzling a minor's settlement account. Cornered and terrified, Dustin signed the car title over without a fight. Marcus and I drove straight to the Bureau and legally transferred the vehicle into my name. The officer studied the paper. He radioed dispatch to run the vehicle identification number. 30 seconds later, the radio crackled back, confirming I was the sole legal owner. The officer's expression shifted from stern authority to deep, professional irritation. He realized instantly that his department had been weaponized for a petty family vendetta. He handed the paper back to me, apologized for the interruption, and turned around. The officers walked out of the bakery and marched straight across the street toward Natalie. Her smug smile vanished. The color completely drained from her face as the officers boxed her in against a brick wall. Filing a false police report and misusing the emergency dispatch system is a serious first-degree misdemeanor in Ohio, because she was the one who physically made the call. She took the full brunt of the legal blow. I stood by the window and watched as the officers pulled out their citation books. Natalie tried to argue, pointing her finger toward the bakery, but the officers were not having it. They publicly cited her right there on the sidewalk in front of dozens of onlookers. The humiliation was absolute. Her golden child facade crumbled into dust on a busy city street. The fallout was rapid and devastating. Without my $1,500 a month, Dustin and Brianna completely defaulted on their second mortgage. The foreclosure notices turned into an actual eviction. They lost the house, the fake prestige, and the comfortable life they built on the back of my suffering. The court eventually mandated full restitution of my settlement funds. When the $45,000 finally hit my new secure bank account, I did not celebrate with a massive purchase. I sat on my thrift store couch, stared at the balance on my screen, and cried out of sheer relief. The money represented my pain, my lost youth, and my ultimate freedom. 5 months later, the hollow echo arrived. A lengthy, rambling voicemail from Brianna appeared on my phone. She used a borrowed number to bypass my block. She cried. She talked about how much she missed her little girl. She pleaded with me to remember the good times, insisting she only did what she had to do for the family. She was looking for an opening, a tiny crack in my armor where she could insert her guilt and regain control. I listened to the entire message in silence. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. I felt absolutely nothing but a profound, heavy pity for a woman who would rather destroy her child than admit her own failures. I pressed delete. I permanently blocked the new number, put my phone down, and went into the kitchen to make dinner with my friends. I share this story not to brag about a victory, but to dismantle the dangerous myths we are taught about unconditional family loyalty. We are conditioned from childhood to believe that shared blood is a sacred contract, that enduring abuse from relatives is somehow a noble sacrifice. It is not. It is exploitation wrapped in a comforting lie. When you strip away the biology, the psychology of a toxic family system is incredibly simple and ruthlessly predictable. Abusers do not target the weakest member of the family. They target the strongest. They target the one with the empathy, the work ethic, and the conscience, because those are the resources they lack. Dustin and Brianna did not keep me in the garage because I was incapable of surviving in the real world. They kept me in the garage because they knew I was the only one capable of keeping their world from collapsing. If you are currently trapped in a dynamic where your suffering is required for someone else's comfort, I need you to understand 3 fundamental rules of survival. Rule number 1, family duty is a two-way street. If the financial support, the emotional labor, and the sacrifices only flow in one direction, it is no longer a relationship. It is extortion. True family empowers you to build your own life. Toxic relatives weaponize your loyalty to keep you permanently tethered to their failures. Rule number 2, silence does not buy peace with toxic people. Making yourself smaller, hiding your achievements, and handing over your paycheck will never satisfy them. It only funds your own imprisonment. Every time you compromise your boundaries to avoid an argument, you are teaching them that their manipulation works. The only way to win a rigged game is to flip the board and walk away. Rule number 3, the greatest revenge is not seeing them fail. It is not watching them lose their house or face public humiliation. Although the karmic justice is undeniably satisfying, the ultimate victory is the absolute, undisturbed quiet of your own space. It is waking up on a Tuesday morning and realizing that nobody is coming down the stairs to tell you what you owe them. It is the profound peace of an empty room where their voices can no longer reach you. I built a beautiful life out of the wreckage they left behind. My chosen family treats me with the respect and dignity I was always denied at that Thanksgiving table. I am safe, I am solvent, and I am entirely my own person. So I ask you to look closely at your own life. Are you paying the physical, emotional, or financial price for someone else's comfort? If you completely disappeared from their budget today, would they still invite you to sit at the table? Would they still call you family? Do not let guilt convince you to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. You have the right to lock the door, walk away, and build a life that belongs exclusively to you. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there asking, why on earth did Whitney pay $1,500 a month to live in an unheated garage? Why didn't she just leave? It is incredibly easy to judge from the outside. But let us break down what is really happening here. Because financial abuse in toxic families rarely looks like a classic hostage situation. It usually looks like a normal Thanksgiving dinner. To understand why Whitney stayed for so long, you have to understand the psychology of the slot machine effect, formerly known in behavioral science as intermittent reinforcement. Toxic families do not treat the scapegoat terribly 100% of the time. If they did, the victim would just pack up and walk away. Instead, they mix the financial extortion with tiny crumbs of hope, a rare compliment, a tearful plea that we are keeping this family together, or a fake promise that things will eventually get better. Whitney was not stupid. She was conditioned. She was paying $1,500 every single month, pulling the lever on that emotional slot machine, hoping she might finally hit the jackpot and win her parents' genuine love. But the game was entirely rigged. They were harvesting her empathy to cover up their own massive financial incompetence. But when that illusion finally broke, Whitney executed an absolute masterclass in financial self-defense. Let us look at the specific smart moves she made. First, she used the audit strategy. Financial abusers rely on shadows, guilt, and confusion. By legally controlling the utility apps on her phone, Whitney weaponized the very accounts her parents forced her to open. She cut the internet, gas, and electric with 3 taps on a screen. The lesson here: if your name is legally on the bill, you hold the ultimate power to kill it. Second, she prioritized building the case over dramatic arguments. Whitney and Grandpa Marcus did not just take the car and drive away hoping for the best. They forced the title transfer under the very real threat of federal mail theft statutes. And then they drove straight to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to make the ownership legally bulletproof. When Natalie tried the ultimate manipulation tactic by filing a false police report, Whitney did not have to scream or defend her character. She simply handed over the official registration. Liars and scammers absolutely hate a solid paper trail. Months later, I realized freedom does not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it sounds like a quiet apartment with working heat. It smells like bread cooling on the counter after a long bakery shift. It feels like sleeping through the night without wondering which bill my parents will force into my name next. The $45,000 finally landed in my account. But I did not celebrate with champagne or a new car. I sat on my couch and cried, not because I was sad, but because that money proved I had not imagined the cruelty. My pain had been real. My suffering had been manufactured. And for the first time, something that belonged to me was actually in my hands. Dustin and Brianna lost the house. Natalie lost her audience, her comfort, and the power to humiliate me without consequences. But the greatest victory was not watching them fall. The greatest victory was realizing I no longer cared if they understood what they had done. Brianna still tried once. She called from a borrowed number, crying about family, forgiveness, and how hard life had become. For a second, the old guilt stirred in my chest. Then I remembered the garage, the frozen nights, the bleach on my uniforms, the Thanksgiving table where my pain was treated like a payment plan. I pressed delete. That was the moment I knew I was finally free. So if you are listening to this while carrying people who would never carry you back, hear me clearly. You are not selfish for wanting your own money. You are not cruel for cutting off utilities, accounts, cars, or access that should never have been dumped on you in the first place. And you are not betraying a family by refusing to finance people who treat your suffering like rent. Blood does not give anyone the right to drain you dry. If they only call when they need help, if they only praise you when you are useful, if they only remember you when a bill is due, then they do not love you. They love the service you provide. Close the account, take your name off the bill, keep the paperwork, lock the door, and when they call you ungrateful, remember this: sometimes peace begins the moment you stop paying for a seat at a table that never valued you. If this story hit close to home, tell me in the comments, have you ever been used as the responsible one in a toxic family? Drop a black heart if you finally chose yourself. And subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, hard boundaries, and the day the scapegoat walks out for good. Here is the hard truth. You cannot buy respect from people who view you as an emergency fund. Securing your independence is the ultimate buyout. Blood might make you relatives, but shared biology does not give anyone a license to destroy your financial future. If this story struck a nerve, or if you have survived a rigged family game yourself, drop a comment below and tell us how you broke free. Hit subscribe for more real talk on navigating the hardest relationships in your life. Remember, protect your peace and always protect your assets.